Hi, this is Anya Fedish for Real Estate Talk, and I'm here today with Ross Levine, who is a real estate attorney in New York City. Hi, how are you?
Good. This is round 2.
It is, yeah. So, driving in the city all the time, I'm seeing all those new constructions, and that's what I want to talk about. What's the difference between when you're buying new construction or you're buying resale?
Big difference is that a lot of times the product that you're looking at isn't even created yet.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge
That's a big distinction. So what typically we rely upon is the offering plan, which is a huge book that we read for our clients, which says and informs us about the whole project and what the unit should look like and the different finishes and the size of the unit. And that is the key difference because the unit isn't sometimes created. And a lot of
client can has an impact on the offering plan. Can he require some changes in that?
Never. But that's why it's very important to hire someone like myself to go through and comb through the entire offering plan and give detailed notes, because a lot of times the buyer will go in even at the final inspection and walk through and say, wait, this isn't right, or that's not right, and that's not what I was told. For instance, I once had a client who was so upset. I took over her file before, so I didn't advise her on the offering plan, but I took over the file midway, and she was upset that there was no electric blinds, and she expected electric blinds. What could I say?
Okay.
But the reason for raising alarm to that is we would go back and see in the architect's description if electric blinds would be provided.
But I would think that's extremely difficult. I would say that unfortunately most of the time people, they don't have an imagination. So
but you also have to be very careful, right? How many times do you go with clients at a resale and you can see that there's a chandelier, or there are 5 electrical outlets, or there's a certain washer dryer. Here you're relying upon marketing materials, which may not be 100% truthful.
And how often you see that they go with virtual visualization? Do they do it?
Nowadays they do. For some of these big condominiums that buildings are putting up, they do a lot of the virtual tours, which are pretty neat. But that again isn't 100% accurate, and a lot of times these purchase agreements will say don't rely upon that, or we have no liability if that's incorrect, which is mind-blowing if you think about it. Absolutely.
And then what about time? Like how they can be sure that they will close at a certain time?
Great question. There are a lot of times where there's an inherent conflict between the parties. The buyer may want to close earlier, but the seller can't, because the seller as a sponsor has to get sometimes all the time, a certificate of occupancy, sometimes different tax lots, and that may take time because the city of New York has so many different projects that they're working on, and they may not get to it so quickly. So what happens is, if there isn't what's called an outside closing date, a client may be stuck in a contract for a long time.
Okay, and if it's like extremely long time, let's say that they are waiting over a year to close and they're supposed to close within the next 3 months, then what? Can they back off?
Well, see, that you can't get out of a contract unless everyone in the project is offered the right to rescind, which means to get out of the contract. Typically, the projects will have an obligation to close by a certain date. And only one closing has to occur before that date. And if one closing doesn't occur by that date, then everyone can get out.
Let's say it's a huge building, 100 units, and there is only one apartment in contract. Then what? When they can start closing? What percentage of the apartment has to be in
Great question. So
contract?
In order for closings to actually occur, the declaration of the condominium needs to be recorded and filed. So what happens is, in order typically to have that occur, at least 15% of the units must be in contract.
That's it?
For the entire building, 15% or more. Then the sponsor can say, I want to record the declaration and essentially get everything ready for closing.
Okay. I thought that it's way more. That it's like at least 50%.
They're obligated typically if they're 80% in contract.
Okay.
If it's under 80 and more than 15.
Okay, so what's happened if it's only 15% of the building sold? What's happening with maintenance and all the common charges? How is that covered?
Well, what happens is the sponsor still is obligated to maintain paying for the units it owns.
Okay.
Right? So
So if I'm buying an apartment and I will be the only one living in an entire building, I don't have to pay the maintenance for all of them.
Correct. You only pay for what your obligations are, but that's interesting to note because a lot of times the offering plan, which again we discussed, will say, oh, sponsor will control the board of managers for up to 5 or 7 years or until it sells a certain number of units. And clearly the way you would want the building to be run could be differently than someone who doesn't live there.
So for me, like from my personal life, there will be a little bit risk. It's the same like, let's say that I'm meeting a guy that is over 40 years old, he's been never married,
Right.
He doesn't have kids, and I would rather go with the guys that they are kind of coming from recycle, so they know the experience.
Yes.
And I would say it will be the same with the apartment. If you buy something
yes.
that was used, whatever happened probably already happened.
Well, that's
when
the
you
thing,
buy
right?
a new place,
It could be potentially used, not abused, right?
yes.
So, no, some people like to have apartments that have been test run, if you will, right? Just like brand new cars. Although there are a lot of clients that I have that want brand new and the latest and greatest.
Okay.
And sometimes, so that's why there's so many different apartments around. I wouldn't recommend one or the other, but I will urge my clients buying a new construction to be cautious that you're buying something based on paper. It's not there for them that's tangible, that they can touch and feel, and that most of the time there are expectations that there are certain tweaks that have to be done.
Okay, I will make a left right
Perfect.
here and I will drop you on that.
That is awesome.
Right.
I think this was good.
Yeah, it was perfect. Okay, so I will see you next week, maybe?
Yes, we can do.
Cool.
What else can we do?
I'm still recording, you know that.
Yeah, I know, but you're going to cut it out.
Maybe.